Hello, in this video we will see how we can create multiple records in Salesforce using a flow, but we will not use loops inside the flow. We will use a screen flow and we will give users the ability to decide how many records they want to create. We'll take a use case as an example. Let's discuss the use case first. The idea is to give users the ability to create multiple child cases from a parent case. The following functionality must be included. There should be a button called Create Child Case in the case detail page, and when the user clicks on this button, the user will be provided with the ability to give the number of child cases that they want to create. Once the user gives that input and clicks on next, that many child cases should be created and related to the parent case. Now let's discuss the design of the flow. First, we will give the user the ability to enter the number of child cases that they want to create as soon as they click on the button. We'll do this with a screen element. Then we will assign the number that the user has given as input to a variable. We'll use this as a counter. Let's say the user inputs 3. Then we will check if the counter is 0. If it's not, it will flow to the path where it will go ahead and create a case and assign it to a collection variable. In the next step, we will decrease the counter by 1. We will repeat this until the counter becomes 0. As soon as the counter becomes 0, the flow will flow to the other path. And in this path, we will use a create element to create all the cases that is there in the collection variable. In short, this will create all the child cases. Now let's jump to the Salesforce instance and create the flow. We'll go to flows and create a screen flow. The first element will be a screen element where we will ask the user to give the input. We'll first label the screen element, add a number field as input. So here the user will specify how many child cases they want to create. We'll give a label to the field. Make it a required field. Enter a default value of 1. So at least one child case will get created when they click on the Create Child Case button. Now we will use an assignment element to assign the input that the user has given to a variable. This variable will be used as a counter further down in the flow. We'll create a variable of data type number, give an API name to this variable. Will not give any decimal place. Click on done and assign the value from the screen element. So once we define the variable which we will use as a counter, now we will use a decision element. We will use this decision element to check what is the current counter. We'll give a label to this decision element. So there will be two paths. In one path, we will check if the counter is greater than 0. If the counter is greater than 0, we will continue creating child record and assigning two collection variables. And as soon as the counter is 0, we'll go ahead and create all the child cases that is there inside the collection variable. So in this path, we will check if the counter is greater than 0. And then click on done. As long as the counter is greater than 0, we will create child cases. And we will do this with an assignment element. We'll name the assignment element. We'll create a record variable which will basically hold the child case. We'll specify the object as case, give it an API name, and click on done. Now let's go to the case UI and try to create a case from the UI to see which fields we should include. We'll include status, priority, case origin, we'll specify status as new. Next field will be priority. We'll set the priority as medium. Then we will set the case origin. Let's specify the origin as phone. Next field, let's specify the subject. To specify the subject, we will create a new resource, a formula resource of type text, and let's have the subject in a specific format. So the subject will be, it will have the text child case hyphen and the counter value. So if we want to create 3 child cases, then the subject of those child cases will be child case hyphen 1, child case hyphen 2, and finally child case hyphen 3. Let's name this resource and click on done. So we have specified a subject field. The next very important field to specify is the parent ID. So this will basically associate this child case to the parent ID. And for this we will create a record variable. The important thing to keep in mind is the API name. This has to be the exact API name called record ID. So this will basically pick up the ID of the record from where we are calling the flow. So the parent ID will be the ID of the record ID. make sure all the right fields are specified. And the last assignment will be assigning this child case to a collection variable. Object will be case, and we check on this checkbox to make it a collection variable. The checkbox is allow multiple values. We'll give a API name to this collection variable. Let's name it child case collection, and then click on done. And we will add the child case to this collection variable. We will repeat this assignment until the counter is 0. So the next is to subtract 1 from the counter. Once we do that, we will connect this to the decision element. We will change the view to freeform and connect it to the decision element. This is kind of making this like a flow, like a loop without actually using a loop element. So this process of assigning child cases to the collection variable and reducing the counter by 1 will be repeated until the counter becomes 0. So once the counter becomes 0, it will flow to the other path where we will basically create all the child record that is there in the collection variable. This is what we have just done. So our flow is now ready. We'll click on save and assign a label to our flow. Click on save. Activate this flow. Now the next step will be creating a button in the case detail page. For that we will use a quick action. So we'll go to case object and go to button links and action. We'll click on new action. Action type will be flow. We already have the flow that we just created in the field flow. We give a label and name and then click on save. We already have an action with the same name. So let's change the name and click on save. Let's delete the action, the previous action that is already there in order to avoid confusion. We'll leave the action that we just created. Let's delete the previous one. The next step will be to add this action in the case page layout. So we have the action that we just created. Let's add it to the page layout. We go to case page layout, edit the case layout. We go to mobile and lightning actions. We can see the action that we just created, drag it and place it in the layout. And then click on save. Now let's edit the case detail page. and add the action that we just made available in the case page layout. We click on the highlight panel. So if we check here, the action that we just created is not present. So we will click on add action. And search for our action, the action that we just created. Click on done and drag it to the top so that it's the first button that we can see in the case detail page. Click on save. Go back to our case detail page and we can see the button now. Let's test the button. I am in a test case. We see there are no related cases. We click on create child case. Let's create 3 child cases. Click on next. Go back to related and we can see now that there are 3 related cases. Let's create some child cases inside the child cases. We'll open the first child case, go to related, we see there are no related cases. We click on the button again and now let's create 5 related cases. Click on next. We go to related and we can see that there are 5 related cases. So our flow is working as expected. If you made it to the end of the video, you should subscribe. Like the video and drop a comment if you have any suggestions. Ciao.